Hi everyone, and a warm welcome to tomorrow's Tech Today, bringing you the latest in technology talent, transformational change, and of course, tech as a force for good. I'm your host, Senator Sally Eaves, and in a time of such dynamic change, our focus today is on innovation drivers and opportunities, with a special focus on AI and generative AI, drawing on insights from Dell Technologies' latest Innovation Catalyst report. We also address the challenges too, particularly in the areas of cybersecurity, compliance, IT business alignment, the specific characteristics of LLMs and skills gaps, especially around data literacy and AI fluency. In this age of AI, data and everything around it, it really does remain your differentiator. So to explore exactly this and a lot more, I'm delighted to be joined now by Elliot Young, Chief Technology Officer at Dell Technologies EMEA. Without further ado, a very warm welcome to the show. Elliot, fantastic to spend time with you today.
Hi, Sally. Good to see you again.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I think a great way to start, perhaps get to know a little bit more about the person behind the tech. Perhaps you could share a bit more about your role, Elliot, at Dell Technologies.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm CTO for EMEA, and I'm very fortunate in my role that I get to spend a lot of time with customers, seeing how they get the maximum value out of IT. And what it means is that having that access, I can help other customers navigate around potential pitfalls, see what's working really well, see what lessons we can learn. It's really all about collaborating with our customers so they get the maximum value from that investment.
Love that. And just fresh from Dell Tech World as well. I think that's a great example.
What an amazing event.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
many people there. It's just massive interest and hype around generative AI.
Absolutely. And it's a community as well, isn't it? I love that.
Huge community.
Love that. Absolutely. Brilliant stuff. So we'll share some more kind of highlights from Dell Tech World after the show as well. I think it'd be brilliant to bring that to attention. But you mentioned Gen AI there. And obviously the new research that's come out, the Innovation Catalyst research from Dell Technologies, really, really interesting. And perhaps as a starter for 10, we could drill into that a little bit more and kind of what we're seeing about what leadership in AI looks like and what we can learn from companies that are performing particularly well. There's some really interesting insights there about when you're really high growth, kind of high innovation opportunity by that investment in AI. So perhaps we could start there.
Yes, certainly.
Brilliant. So what's your take in terms of the characteristics we can kind of learn from that data about what companies are doing well when they're pursuing this journey?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of companies talk about AI, but what do we actually mean by AI? Companies have been doing some form of AI for a number of years, and that typically includes things like machine learning or reinforcement learning, that kind of thing. And I think that those kind of solutions are great at traditional kind of use cases like reducing risk, improving efficiency, reducing cost, that kind of thing. Now, generative AI, I'd say, is great at doing those things. But what we're really looking for the most impact is to find business processes that could never possibly exist before. And with generative AI, that is a completely different approach. We're not looking to optimize by a small percentage here and there. We're looking for use cases where we can say, previously, with however many humans we've got working on this, we could never actually carry out that business process. But now with generative AI, just look at the possibilities that are available. And I think when organizations tune into that way of thinking, they can unlock incredible use cases. And that's where we're here to help.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And in terms of those use cases, where are you seeing most innovation opportunities? Because again, in terms of the data we've had a look at, I think processes from a UK performance kind of point of view, streamlining processes came to the top of the agenda, but different kind of variations across global differences. So what are you seeing as kind of most innovation opportunities at the moment through generative AI?
I think at the moment, the low-hanging fruit has got to be any areas which are really heavy in text processing or any business process that can be represented in text.
Absolutely.
And so, for example, if there are any systems in like a medical industry where you're taking constant notes of meetings, or you're getting blood test results, or you're getting feedback from lots of different tests and analysis, then in those particular cases, generative AI is fantastic for doing things like summarizing the text, or asking it questions about the content, or looking for patterns. Another area that's really text heavy, of course, is in IT, where people are looking for coding assistance. Or another one could be in taking live transcripts from contact center conversations and having an AI constantly read all of those transcripts and then work out what do those conversations at any one time have in common and what can we learn from those. I had a fascinating use case recently from an organization in the Middle East, and they were looking for opportunities where they could review on a minute by minute basis what was coming into contact centers and then correlate that with external data. Now, if you were to take a traditional, I call it traditional, but what we know as a pre-trained large language model, that large language model may have ceased to be training 4 months, 5 months ago. So how do you integrate that kind of solution with up to the minute real world data that's coming in, either from your internal systems or from the internet? And so these are the kind of solutions we're looking at, to say, look, build on a pre-trained model, look for opportunities of text heavy processing, which you can heavily automate, and then give the AI access to reach out to other data sets. You know, one of the key things that organizations have, which their other competition doesn't have, is data about their customers. You know, you're not going to find that data in a pre-trained model, but you absolutely will find it in a customer's own data set. So this idea of taking an AI, bringing it close to where the data resides today, and activating it with that, I think that is the sweet spot of opportunity where people should be looking in the first case.
I love that. I think an example for me of that would be in financial services too, but maybe in a non-traditional way. So I know you spoke earlier about tech for good and financial inclusion.
Yes.
But one example I've seen really positively used there is how you can use AI with your own proprietary data set you were talking about there for kind of early identification of customers who might be at risk of, say, defaulting on a payment.
Right.
Their behaviour has changed.
Yes.
And again, you can get in early and really help and build that trusted relationship alongside that too. Because again, what kind of support could you remember more as a customer when you've been in that tricky situation?
Yes.
And people have come to you to help you and get ahead of that and have intervened and support you along that. And I've seen some great work there in that space at the moment. So I definitely want to mention that, because that seems a really nice kind of business and societal benefit at the same time.
Well, exactly right. In that case, you're looking to support customers as opposed to call out some kind of potential fraud or some kind of other problem. If you can actually turn it into a positive opportunity to reinforce the relationship with the customers, I think that's a good thing. And, if you compare the historical approach to those, someone would have created a machine learning model which would be outputting a category. It would say something like, yes, this person would be a great person to make the repayments, or this person potentially has got a risk, or various other small number of categories. Absolutely. And what we find from those machine learning models is they are incredibly susceptible to bias. Yes. And not only to bias of potentially looking at some unintended consequences, but also over time, the data that you input, it drifts. And as that data drifts, there's a risk that the data you trained the AI on originally, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, is not actually the same data you've got coming in now. And that can amplify the bias that those systems put out. And one of the things I've seen is with generative AI solutions, you can take a generative AI solution and actually use it to replace a machine learning use case, which is putting out categories. And in many cases, the Gen AI solution is less susceptible to bias, or if it does start to show some kind of bias, it's a lot easier to detect that and take some action and actually protect the community of people that could be impacted by that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because often when we talk about AI, particularly more traditional AI, and we talk about bias, we neglect the conversation about human biases to a certain degree. And it's like almost 200 or something like that now, human different biases that have been identified. And a lot of that can be baked into data sets, as you were talking about there. So I completely agree with that. And I think the other thing about LLMs that strike me too is we're seeing such an experimental phase at the moment, aren't we? Exactly. But another thing I struck me with the research that Dell's brought out there is we've got some of these kind of intention and action gaps potentially. So really great confidence about AI for competitive advantage and being the lead that will open up all these new innovation cases, but maybe not the same investment in personalized training, for example, to back it up. So I think what you're saying about LLMs is a great point, kind of clarifying some of those gaps, but also showing that we need to do more about training too, because we're opening up these sandboxes and we're using multiple different open source data sets. And a lot of questions with LLMs, we need to make sure we have the guardrails too. So kind of for me, it's tech and education hand in hand, isn't it, in so many ways?
Well, it's such a powerful solution that to a certain extent, people can create things that are way beyond whatever they originally intended.
Indeed.
And so having a way to detect that is very important. And there are a couple of different approaches you could take. You could take a mathematical approach to detecting that, but there's also much easier approaches you can take. For example, you can take the output of one generative AI, actually feed that into the input of another one. And you may have said to the other AI, look, I want you to review this text and actually look for specific bias, or look for anomalies, or look for unexpected output. And if you're happy with that, then allow the data to pass. And if you're not happy with that, then send a message back to the original AI saying you need to refactor this data because you've hit on an area where we would consider guardrails.
Absolutely. And on that point, kind of going beyond governance and looking at security and cybersecurity kind of more broadly, kind of one of the challenge areas that came out of the research was around that field, and kind of areas like phishing, malware, and kind of attacks more broadly were the top 3 areas that came out as kind of big challenge ones. And then if we add obviously AI into the mix here as well, I kind of call it the juxtaposed sword, isn't it really? Because AI can be a great enabler for cybersecurity kind of risk identification, but equally it can be weaponized at the same time. We kind of see it from both sides. So if you bring all those different things together, the security piece remains a really strong priority, obviously for companies across the world at the moment. I wonder if we could just spend a bit of time talking about how Dell specifically is working to kind of address those needs as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think looking years back, the traditional approach would have been to try and create some kind of fingerprint, or to try and detect some kind of capability that would be a really strong indicator that something bad is happening to your environment. And what we've learned is that with the emergence of new types of threats, with people potentially using LLMs to create viruses that are novel and never existed before, then what you actually have to do is get an idea of your systems to say what is good, what is normal. Because once you have that kind of baseline, you can turn on anomaly detection, and the anomaly will say, look, I've never seen this kind of behavior before. What's normal for this user in this context? Or what's normal for this part of the world? Or what's normal for this billing system, for example? And once you can see those anomalies, then the question becomes, how can you take some automated action to keep the organization safe, or to keep the users safe? And so this is one of the key areas that we are focusing on, is that anomaly detection. But the second thing is, in the research, we identified in the statistics that way more than 50% of organizations have been impacted by some kind of security event or cyber attack. And of course, this is not something that typically organizations would want to publicize, but it's a very real thing which is happening right now. And it's surprising to see the number of organizations where their reaction to that has been, oh, we better create a cyber vault, and we keep all our data segregated, completely isolated solution which can't be attacked. But the problem is, if you've already been attacked, is that the time you should be creating a cyber vault? Probably not. Probably a more effective solution is to create the cyber vault in advance, protect a core set of data, and that means that if you need to spin up a clean room in the future in an area where you know for sure is not going to be impacted by that attack, you have that capability sat there waiting to go.
I really like that. And it reminds me as well, there was quite a lot of insights around zero trust and differences from, say, a UK perspective and globally around how far organisations have gone down that journey. If you've got any thoughts around that as well, because again, for me, zero trust, I love to bring in like the tech side, but also the culture piece as well, because it's a very holistic focus, and it's kind of, you have to keep growing with it. It's not once and done, is it?
Well, exactly. And I like the fact that the overwhelming percentage of organizations who are looking at this were adopting a zero trust approach. But as you say, it's more of a mindset. It's saying, when we create new systems, how are you going to create them in a particular way where you're taking this approach that nothing else is trusted? Are you actually architecting solutions so that, in theory, you could put them on the internet and they'd work as effectively as if they're on a corporate network? I like the fact that there's this whole idea of this end-to-end security attack defense posturing from every part of the organization. And that has to be layered with educating the users of those kind of platforms to make sure that they feel that they're part of it, and it's part of their responsibility to keep the organization safe in the way they behave.
Absolutely. I mean, shared responsibility. And again, the training bit, I'd love to come back to a bit later as well, I think really helps to support that. But also, I think if you look at it from a governance and security point of view, we've also got to move from, say, transparency to accountability in these areas too, which Dell's always been really strong on, which has been great to see. But I think that's only going to get more, isn't it? Because if you look at things like, we've got NIST 2, haven't we, that becomes kind of fully actionable in October of this year. But that has UK, Europe, and global implications from a supply chain perspective. And everywhere you look, particularly at C-suite level, there's more personal accountability if this goes wrong too. So everywhere we're looking at this, multiple layers in terms of that responsibility and shared responsibility too. So it's such a key piece.
Well, exactly right. And there's a similar parallel to the AI legislation, for example, in Europe at the moment. People have to take that seriously. There are huge penalties they could be liable for if there's some kind of breach, or if the technology is used in the wrong way, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, with cybersecurity, we see so much collaboration as an area of change, and kind of the bad guys coming together in many ways, bringing back old threats too, which is really interesting. So again, the parallel with AI, more and more organizations working together, being an ecosystem and look at these challenges together, I think is a huge, huge way forward. So I love that. And one other area I wanted to dip into a little bit about supporting all the innovation we're talking about today is the importance of infrastructure, getting those foundations right, but also looking at it from a kind of data as your differentiator point of view. Something I know the audience I speak about quite a lot, and I have a very kind of similar positioning on this. But could we spend a moment on that? Because again, some interesting insights from the new research, but I think it's so important when we're talking about the latest in technologies, we have to get the foundations right. And this data as a differentiator piece deserves some focus, I think. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Elliot.
Well, from a data point of view, there are two approaches. Some people will say, you've got all of this data, it's really important to have very high data quality, and therefore you need to prepare your data before you can start using it. And in some cases, that's absolutely the case. But one of the things that I've observed is that with generative AI, it's incredibly tolerant to situations where the data is not fully precise, or there's some kind of ambiguity, or there's some kind of contradiction. And that's just because of the nature of this idea that instead of a traditional data center, which is there to store data, what we're doing is we're creating AI factories, which its role is to create new data, is to generate tokens, is to take this factory approach of generating more content. And I think that that's really important to know, because what you don't want to do is to block and delay your time to value because you think you have to do all kinds of ETL processes or data quality processes or fix all of your master data problems. I mean, for some organizations, they've been attempting to do that for a number of years and it's still not complete. So is that realistic to do that in the next 6 months? Probably not. Do you need a generative AI solution that's working with your data in the next 6 months? Absolutely, because if you don't have that, you can be assured that your competition is absolutely going to have that capability. So there needs to be some balance in how you manage data where it is and bring these AI capabilities close to it so that AI can interact with your data. Because to be fair, that is the key differentiator that you have that your competitors will not have. Now, having said that, there are some areas where that kind of approach might not work. So an example would be, imagine you've had an intranet in your organization for the last 10 years and everyone's been adding content on it. You may have 10 years worth of content on that intranet, and over time, some of the content will contradict. It'll say something like, I don't know, we did a product announcement 5 years ago and these were the new features. But then if you look at the latest new features for that same product from last month, the new features will be different. So if you go to the AI and say, tell me the top 5 new features for this product, it's going to have as much value on the 5 new features from the last few months versus 5 years ago. So in that particular case, absolutely, yes, there would be an incentive to change the type of data that the AI has access to. But what I'd say is, what we don't want is for your users to get frustrated because they don't have access to a large language model platform and start to take their own action where they go outside of the organization and potentially compromise security, or start leaking data, or start incurring costs in the wrong place. What we'd actually like to do is make sure that organizations have access to a simple, trusted platform where they can bring their data, connect it up, and get using it just for inferencing at the lowest level just from day one. It's surprising how much value users will get from having a kind of chat GPT-like experience, but for their own data in their own trusted environment where they can experiment with it and see what kind of use cases come out of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it also builds that confidence piece as well. I've seen some, I did a session the last week or two, and you saw people using this for the first time, but also just from a learning style identification point of view. They got some feedback, say from ChatGPT as one example amongst many others, obviously as well, but they actually got feedback about how they wrote.
Okay.
And for the first time ever, they'd put something through to their manager or whatever, and they'd got the right way, they got their way of thinking on a page,
so it actually helped them
and
out.
it actually helped them identify what they were looking for from them in terms of their style. So that was a really interesting example too. So AI, generative AI itself, can actually be used for like personalized learning identification and to support that too. So I think hand in hand, some great opportunities here.
Well, that's a really good point, and it's something else that we saw in the results from the survey is that in some organizations there's a disconnect between what IT does and versus what the user departments are doing. And the most, I think it's pretty clear to say that the most impactful use cases that we've come across have been use cases which were created by line of business users. They're not created by data scientists from the IT department or an IT system administrator. They're created by real business people operating in sales or marketing or manufacturing or HR or legal. Or those are the exact people with the domain knowledge and expertise. Once you give them these tools, they kind of run with it, and it's incredible to see what they create.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's a great analogy, isn't it? Because they're closer to those business problems, and then the AI is bringing them closer to understand that data in a different way to help address them. So it's a perfect synergy. I really love that, and again brings me. I've been hinting at this all the way along about this skills piece, but again, a lot came out, I thought, in terms of the research around that as well. And would you say, looking at that, how people generally are feeling about the kind of rapid advances, in particular around the generative AI space, about how confident they're feeling in terms of their skills levels, in terms of applying this, and kind of what differences and nuances you're seeing in the data there, and from your own experience at Dell as well?
Well, I suppose there are different areas to consider. One is, do people feel confident about having the skills to create AI infrastructure from scratch? And probably I'd say not as confident right now because of the technical expertise required. So one of the ways we've addressed that is we said, look, Dell's a huge manufacturer. Let us put together all the components that you need to do this. We'll wrap it up into one package called Dell Validated Design. We'll make that available so that you can either download it for free from our website, or you can have a Dell person come on site and put the whole thing together like a jigsaw puzzle for you. And what that means is, because we've pre-engineered the solution, the customer doesn't have to worry about, what version of this software and this component am I going to put together. They have to worry about, what's the use case? How do I build that use case? How do I protect it? How do I keep it safe? How do I make it trusted? And these are the key business areas. But then on the flip side, once an organization has access to a basic large language model platform where you can just do inferencing, and at this stage we're not talking about RAG or fine tuning or anything like that, just on inferencing, then what we find is it's incredibly quick to give non-technical people skills to build their own AIs. Internally within Dell, we have a training session that trains people how to create new AIs from scratch. How long do you think that training session is?
Oh, I don't know. I could be biased because I actually know the answer, so I probably ought to throw that to the crowd actually. So well, I'll let you describe that, Elliot. But we'll do it as a poll outside of it.
We should do. The level 1 training, where at the end of this training course, you will have created an AI that actually delivers some kind of business value. It's 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Incredible. And that's because you don't need to be a programmer, you don't need to be a data scientist. What you need to be able to do is to articulate your problem in written down language.
Exactly.
And once that language goes into the AI, then we can start to augment it with other things. Like we can say, okay, this is a great starting point, but now let me put my data on top. Or this is a great starting point, and afterwards I'll think about doing fine tuning. But just to get started, it's literally a 30-minute session, and those users are creating AI business capable solutions.
It's brilliant. And again, I think in terms of kind of what we're looking at in terms of people being, say, overworked in organisations at the moment, we're seeing that a lot in terms of burnout and things like that. But this quest for wanting more training or personalised training, it's actually one of the biggest reasons for churn from organisations today. If you don't receive, you're getting that. And previous Dell research on digital transformation brought that to the fore as well. So I couldn't agree more. It's a massive need, and we are going to shout that out as a question because I've actually done that. I've actually done the session, so I felt a bit guilty because I did. And in the mentoring activity I do, again, it's one of the recommended resources because it gets people in. And again, if you can do something in 30 minutes from a confidence and feeling like, yeah, I can do this, and you've got a way in, and you're seeing some immediate results from that as well, it gives that encouragement to keep going. So it's a great way of doing it.
You can be young or old. You can be from a technical background or a non-technical background.
Exactly.
There's nothing stopping people getting into that, and I love to see what people create when they take that. approach.
Yeah, I love that. And going back to what you said about kind of IT and business working together as well, that is another interesting aspect, again, about this collaboration piece that I think that this innovation can support as well. I think AI can be quite a bridge to kind of close those gaps, because again, the culture skills piece of this, I always put is kind of equally as important to the technology. It's this holistic combination.
Right.
Have you got any final thoughts about the AI, how that can help bridge those gaps?
Bridge the gaps
From
between IT and the business?
Yeah, from a collaborative point of view, perhaps.
Well, it's interesting. I tend to think that in large enterprise organizations, sometimes the IT departments can be reluctant to take on some of these LLM-based solutions. And I'll explain them a bit more about why in a second. But in smaller organizations, absolutely rushing forward to it as quickly as possible and saying, yes, let's do it. And I think probably in those smaller corporate level organizations or medium business type organizations, it's very easy to and low friction to communicate with the IT department. When you get into certain enterprise scale organizations, I think that the organization is often configured in such a way that they value nice change control and security and visibility and checking costs and that kind of thing. But actually, what the business units need is a very short time to value. I mean, these people want to start using these solutions next week, not in 6 months. They don't want to wait 12 months for somebody to put a new IT system in, right? And so there's this kind of tension that goes on between the IT departments in large organizations and the business users. And that pressure results in line of business departments building up a certain capability for themselves. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. As long as it's business managed IT as opposed to shadow IT, I think if it's done in a managed way, then that's perfectly justifiable. And on the flip side of the coin, I also don't think that the business leaders should have the expectation that IT departments will magically solve all of their problems with generative AI. I think there needs to be collaboration, and I absolutely think that business departments should be, leading with their skill and their particular area as opposed to addressing it as an IT problem.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And again, just as a side note on that, I'll put some links out to some research. It's by a guy called Luffman, but it looks into IT and business alignment like over the last 40 years or something like that. And it's so interesting, like the parallels from the past, but where certain tweaks have happened, so to speak. So I'll put that in there as well, because it's just a really interesting kind of segue to what you were saying there, Elliot. I really like that. So we can bring that to the fore too. I think the other thing that's ringing through my ears when we're talking here as well is all the things you're talking about, how they're helping to reduce some of the complexity that organisations are struggling with at the moment. I think particularly, again, you could look at it from two approaches, like the smaller agility maybe of an SME, but maybe not some of the resources or the time constraints that come out in the survey too.
Well, exactly. And I think this shows itself in some of the innovative use cases. An example that I like to talk about from a while back now is that of a pizza organisation. Imagine you have a chain of pizza restaurants. Okay, so it's not a huge enterprise organization, but it's not a small organization as well. And you might have said, well, what do I do when I get to the end of every day in a particular restaurant and I've still got some ingredients left? Are you going to write an IT system that can make the best usage of those ingredients? Are you going to reconfigure your SAP system so it looks at all the supply chain to see how you change tomorrow's delivery? Or are you just going to say, actually, I'm going to ask the AI to consider the ingredients that are left over in just one particular restaurant, come up with a new pizza topping in a safe, trusted way, give it a name, perhaps create a picture of that new pizza topping, perhaps launch that page on the website for that particular restaurant, and work out what the price should be. And then hopefully by the end of the day, you will have consumed all of the leftover ingredients. In that kind of approach, could you have ever done that at scale across all of your restaurants every single day? No, absolutely not. But potentially with generative AI, then that's not out of the question. All of those steps could be automated, and if you do it in a secured, trusted way, there's no reason why you shouldn't be looking at those kind of really innovative business processes.
And talking about that, I mentioned pragmatism there, brings me back to kind of skills that make a difference to bring this kind of enact the scale change that we've been talking about today. And it really interested me, some of the kind of skills that came out of the survey. So things like AI fluency, creativity, problem solving skills. That came out very, very high. What for you kind of struck you as most important there? Do you think there's anything missing? Do you think certain skills are maybe kind of underexplored today? Because that's a question I get asked about a lot. You know, I'm looking at my GCSEs at the moment, or A levels, or different equivalents, or you might be an adult that's looking to reskill. Where should I prioritise? You know, there's so much going on. Kind of where do I focus in on? So I'd love to spend a moment on that, because it's a really interesting area, I think, for people.
Well, obviously STEM is going to be a big area of interest, but there are some new roles which are emerging for generative AI that previously, even a year or two ago, didn't exist. So one of the obvious ones is in prompt engineering. And it turns out that there is a particular skill in having a human that can interact with an AI and construct their thoughts in such a way that you get the maximum value from an AI. So, for example, somebody that can use a chain of thought approach to explain what they want to get from an AI that will get the best response. And then going forward from that, we also have this idea of what I call agentic trainers. So agents, LLMs, are where you take one large language model platform, but you give it multiple personas. And these personas act together in a team. And for each team member, you can choose to give it a superpower, which in technical terms is just a function. But basically, a superpower might be this AI can write Python code and actually execute it. This AI over here, it can document IT systems. This AI over here, it can do a lookup on our customer database if you give it an account number. Or this AI over here can give us a summary of the last 5 customer meetings that a company had with their customer. Once you put all of those AIs together working in a team, what you find is an unexpected finding, which is that a large language model, where if you asked it one question and you just got one answer back, the performance of it would typically be based on things like how much GPU memory did you have available, how many parameters were in the large language model, what was the data it was pre-trained on, all of these technical considerations. Actually, when you get a team of agents working together, because they have a conversation with each other, they actually bounce off each other, and the quality of the output, although it takes a bit longer to get to that output, the quality is far, far superior than had you just asked one large language model a question and got one answer. Because you have like a manager of the AIs, which is another AI, and it says, oh, well, I don't like this response, so go back and do it again. You know, so this team really is collaborating, and when they're really happy as a team that they've got high quality answer, that answer goes back to the user. So from the human's point of view, you think you've asked the AIs one question and you get one response back, but in actual fact, to get to that response, it might have been 50 conversations. So there's a whole new skill emerging where people have the ability to configure these AIs so that you get really effective teams. And what we've also seen is people are using large language models to generate the definition of what each of these agents are doing. So it's like AI creating the definition of AIs, which then work together as a team to do something that the humans originally asked for. So that, again, is a new skill which has literally emerged in the last 4 or 5 months. So prompt engineering, building agentic solutions, future skills around guardrails, or future skills around well, there's an entire roadmap of new capabilities which we are launching. We just launched at Dell Technologies as well, but new capabilities you're seeing here over the next few months. Microsoft Ignite is coming up, so they're going to be similar capabilities. So having those kind of skills that hook into all of those new technical capabilities is really the area that I'd say to go for. Because once an organization has a large language model platform, these are all building blocks, these are all stepping stones the organization can take. If your organization has no large language model platform, and you're just relying on some cloud solution, you actually are at a disadvantage compared to your competition who have their own platform, their own capabilities, and these people that are deploying these new skills.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we say a lot, particularly at kind of mentoring events and things like that, about roles yet to be invented with the advance of technology. What you were describing there, I think, is a great representation of some of these new roles that are emerging now, and obviously more of those to come. I think data curation, data storytelling, what we do with the archiving of data as well, given so much hasn't had the opportunity at the moment to be repurposed in a secure way. How can we use that as part of the training solution, for example? So many questions around that and things we can dive into. I know probably another day, but I'd love to do that more because I think it's a really, really fascinating point. And it takes me on to one final area as well, is the use of AI to support these learning and training needs as well.
So I talk sometimes about metacognition, and I use a little bit of a joke that it's kind of like gym for your brain, basically. But it helps you, I think, AI to identify how you learn. So we talk about all this, smart technology we have today, but how can we use technology to help us be kind of smarter thinkers too, to know what works for us? Because quite often curriculums are very one particular way of teaching, and it can be more linear, but there's lots of different learning styles, being quite kinetic and visual, lots of different ways of doing it. AI can help a person identify, and a teacher or a facilitator, what works for that particular individual. And I think if we use that as another superpower, we can help people get more confident, not just getting the access to the technology, but actual confidence to apply the skills at the same time. So I kind of love what your thoughts are on that.
Exactly right. And have you seen the technology called Recall?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely
Brilliant.
incredible solution. For people who haven't heard of it, basically there is a new category of PCs has emerged which have these neural processing units in them. And the neural processing units offload certain activities from the CPU or the GPU. Not only does that accelerate the speed that these laptops and PCs work at, it extends the battery life. But the other thing it does is it gives you brand new capabilities which are built right into the operating system that never existed before. Recall is one of those. Effectively, what it's doing is every 8 seconds, it's taking a kind of metadata snapshot of what's on the screen. So it's not taking an image, but it's recording that certain data was presented on the screen, and it's like building up a kind of long-term, highly secure personal memory for that user. Like for the techies point of view, in the old days you'd have a swap file on a laptop or something, and you'd vary the size of it depending on how much you wanted to use. This is a similar kind of approach. You can dedicate a certain amount of the capacity of the storage on the laptop to act as this kind of never-ending memory, which from an organizational productivity point of view is amazing. Because imagine if you can talk, you can type and have a conversation with this thing and say, look, I'm sure I had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and in that meeting we discussed this, that, and the other, and there was a matching graph on the screen. What was that graph telling me, and how can I reference that to go back? That is an incredible capability, because the recall solution will answer the question in the context. It's like having an AI memory that's just for you. So can you imagine the possibilities for developing your own skills and developing your own capabilities? It's like you've got somebody who's got your back the whole time, because they have access to exactly what you've seen, what you've experienced, and that's a kind of springboard for you to jump off of.
I love that. I love the whole metaphor, but we've got your back, which I think kind of describes a lot of the different elements of the conversation. There's a real strong focus here on facilitation and kind of working with people to achieve these different results and things. So I love that. And that's really, really clever, because how many times is it like you're trying to recall something, as you're describing there, and you have these little fragments, don't you, of little memories, and you're trying to connect different, it might be a smell or a sense, different senses, you're trying to build them all together. And how many times it takes you to get to that answer with that.
Yes. It's unlocking creativity.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's giving you a different way to reframe what you looked at in the past and learn from it. There's so many ways that kind of technology can be used. And once you've tried that technology on one of those laptops, you probably don't want to go back to your old way of working.
Absolutely.
It is a phenomenal experience.
Definitely. Well, Elliot, honestly, I could speak to you for more and more, but I know we have to bring these things to wrap for today. But perhaps as a final thought, just kind of going over everything we've been talking about today, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience of something to look at now? Because I always think with conversations like this, there's so much in it, isn't there? The things for people to think about that they could take on board over the next day or so, to reflect on, what can I do now? Maybe if something's really appealed to them, to take action, to start making some changes, to do things differently.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the main thing I would recommend to organizations is to say, what use cases can you unlock with generative AI where you are leveraging inferencing? And I'm not saying don't do RAG or don't do fine tuning, but one of the things we've seen is that some organizations will start off with a large language model which actually has a really small input window. And what they're actually doing is they're blocking themselves from having access to a number of different use cases. If you can get started with a large language model with a big context window or big input window, what this actually means is that you can take, for example, an entire customer's history and load that into your query and ask the AI about it. Or you can take an entire person's medical history and put that in. Or you can take all the log files from a virtual machine and say to the AI, analyze that. This kind of capability, the giving you access to consume your own data that's private to you, which nobody else has access to, you can have access to that just through inferencing without worrying about all of these other more technical solutions. So I'd say if there's one thing to get started in, give your business users this capability to ask questions to a large language model platform, but give them the ability to input their actual business data and start consuming that right away.
I love that. And I think that seems a very safe, kind of staged, incremental approach to kind of democratize that capacity to innovate across all users. I love that. I love
later
that, Elliot.
on, if you want to build on that with big RAG solutions with large data sets, then of course you've got a strong foundation to build on.
Definitely. I love that. Brilliant, Elliot. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Great to see you again. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And thank you all for watching and listening in too. We'll be back soon with another episode of Tomorrow's Tech Today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Tomorrow's Tech Today. If you enjoy what we're doing, please subscribe to us and leave a review. It really means a lot. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram and see more behind the scenes video footage on YouTube. Thanks for listening.